Throughout aviation history, engineers have pushed the limits of speed, power, and design. But not every experiment was successful. Some planes were so risky, so unstable, or so dangerous that they never made it into the sky safely. Welcome to Forgotten Machines. Today we're exploring the top 10 experimental planes too dangerous to fly. Number 10. Northrop XP-279 Flying Ram. Imagine a fighter jet equipped with reinforced wings so powerful that they can literally smash enemy aircraft out of the sky. Sounds like a sci-fi movie, right? Well, during World War II, this concept wasn't just a figment of imagination but a real-life experiment. Enter the Northrop XP-79 Flying Ram. The Flying Ram was an American single-seat, single-engine jet fighter designed by Northrop in 1944. Its primary purpose was to engage in aerial combat by ramming enemy planes, a tactic known as the with-one technique. It sounds insane, but tactics evolve, and this was one such evolution. This technique involved ramming enemy aircraft with such force that the impact would destroy both planes. But how did the XP-79 Flying Ram achieve this? Its wings were constructed with thicker leading edges to withstand the immense forces generated during a collision, ensuring the pilot's survival. But it wasn't all about brute force. Precision was equally important. And to achieve that, the Flying Ram was equipped with an improved gun sight. Now let's talk about its performance. The XP-79 Flying Ram had impressive stats for its time. With a top speed of over 400 miles per hour and an operational range of 1,200 miles, it boasted a fuel capacity of 4,800 pounds. Armed with four 20mm cannons, it was ready for action. But like many advanced concepts, the Flying Ram wasn't without its challenges. During its initial test flight in June 1945, the aircraft encountered some pretty scary moments. The nose of the plane dropped unexpectedly during a high-speed run, giving pilot Tex Johnson quite a scare. The cause of the sudden dive, a malfunction in the automatic pilot system. But the drama didn't end there. Just a month later, the Flying Ram met its demise. On July 28, 1945, pilot Tex Johnson took the plane up for another test flight. This time the results were fatal. Despite making minor adjustments after the June incident, the automatic pilot once again malfunctioned, causing the aircraft to lose altitude. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Johnson ejected, but unfortunately he didn't survive the fall. He was found dead near the wreckage of the XP-79. Needless to say, the tragic outcome of these test flights raised serious concerns about the aircraft's safety and reliability. As a result, the United States military decided to cancel the XP-79 Flying Ram project. This decision wasn't just because of the accidents, but also due to the end of World War II. The war was over and the need for such a specialized aircraft had vanished. Additionally, the development costs were becoming too high to justify continuing the project. So the Flying Ram, with its bold concept and tragic fate, was laid to rest, becoming a footnote in aviation history. Number 9. Vought V-173 Flying Pancake. If you ever witnessed a plane taking off from a short runway, you might have wondered if it's possible to go any smaller. Meet the Vought V-173, an aircraft so unique in its design that it looked more like a giant pancake batter than a fighter jet. Developed by Chance Vought in the early 1940s, this experimental plane had an incredibly low profile, being only 1.5 feet tall. Now that's what I call a low-slung aircraft. The V-173 was designed to operate from short runways, a feature that was highly desirable during World War II when space was limited. But that wasn't its only intriguing aspect. The plane was essentially a circular disc-shaped fuselage with a pair of wings attached to its sides. That's right, it looked like a flying pancake. The disc-like shape was revolutionary for its time, aiming to provide better maneuverability and handling characteristics. But let's face it, it just looked really cool. Powered by a single 1,600 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2180 radial engine, the V-173 had impressive stats. It could reach a top speed of around 275 miles per hour and had a service ceiling of 37,400 feet. Those are some seriously impressive numbers for a plane that looks like it came straight out of a cartoon. But as they say, looks can be deceiving. While it may have seemed like a promising design, the V-173 had its fair share of drawbacks. Due to its low profile, the aircraft offered very little protection to its pilot, and it was pretty tricky to get in and out of. But the biggest problem with the V-173 was its stability. Because of its unique shape, the plane was incredibly sensitive to changes in airflow, making it prone to turbulence and making landings, well, let's just say interesting. Now add to that the fact that the engine was mounted behind the wing, which threw off the center of gravity and made the plane even harder to control. The pilots who flew the V-173 described it as being extremely difficult to handle, comparing it to trying to land a bouncing ball. No. 8. McDonnell XF-85 Goblin. Imagine a tiny fighter jet that lives inside a bomber until it's needed to attack enemy planes. It might sound like a scene from a sci-fi movie, but it was actually a real-life concept developed during the Cold War era. Enter the McDonnell XF-85 Goblin. a parasite fighter designed to be carried internally within larger bombers like the B-47 and B-52. The idea behind the Goblin was pretty straightforward yet ingenious. It allowed the U.S. Air Force to carry multiple fighters within a bomber, reducing the number of aircraft needed for air superiority missions. Not only that, but launching the fighters from inside the bomber provided an element of surprise and increased survivability. But this small jet fighter wasn't just a hitchhiker in the bomber. It was equipped with everything a regular fighter would have, including radar, fire control systems, and deadly weaponry. Although it was small, the Goblin packed a punch, typically armed with 2 air-to-air missiles. Now let's talk about its design. The XF-85 was a compact jet fighter with a length of just 27 feet. To make this aircraft, McDonnell Douglas essentially shrunk down the components of a regular fighter jet. They removed the landing gear and other unnecessary features to keep the weight down and maximize efficiency. However, this presented a unique challenge for landing. The solution was a set of disposable landing skids. Yeah, you heard that right. Skids. It was intended that after the jet fighter finished its mission, it would simply ditch into the ocean and be written off. Talk about a disposable aircraft. But as with many innovative ideas, the XF-85 Goblin had its fair share of problems. The main issue was with the method of returning to the bomber after engaging enemy aircraft. It was supposed to simply dock back into the bomber like a spaceship Enterprise, but in reality, things got a bit bumpy. Test pilots reported that the Goblin had a tendency to bounce off the bomber during docking attempts. Talk about an unwelcome surprise. Can you imagine the chaos of a fighter jet bouncing off your bomber mid-air? Now, despite these issues, the U.S. Air Force pressed on with the project. They wanted to integrate the XF-85 into their bomber fleet as soon as possible. By the end of 1956, several hundred of these airborne Tinker Toys had been produced, but the Air Force's enthusiasm was not shared by the pilots. Many of them saw the Goblin as a dangerous and impractical project. The idea of a parasite fighter was abandoned and the XF-85 was left behind, never to take flight again. Number 7. Douglas X-3 Stiletto. Imagine a sleek, needle-like jet fighter zooming through the skies at supersonic speeds. Sounds exciting, right? Well, meet the Douglas X-3 Stiletto, an experimental aircraft that was designed to push the boundaries of speed and maneuverability. Developed by the legendary aircraft manufacturer Douglas Aircraft Company, the X-3 was a marvel of engineering and design. Its name, the Stiletto, was inspired by the long, slender shape of the aircraft, which resembled a pointed shoe used by Italian assassins. Talk about a stylish killer. The primary objective of the X-3 was simple yet ambitious: break the sound barrier in level flight. But this was no easy task. Breaking the sound barrier was considered a monumental challenge, and the X-3 was up for the job. Built with cutting-edge technology for its time, the X-3 was powered by a single Marquardt RJ-41 ramjet engine. This engine was unlike the traditional turbojet engines used in most aircraft. It didn't require moving parts like a turbine, which allowed it to operate at much higher speeds. The X-3 was designed to be a glider, meaning it had no means of controlling its direction once in the air. The plan was for a launch vehicle to deliver the X-3 to a certain altitude, and then the ramjet would take over, propelling it forward. But as you might have guessed, the X-3 Stiletto had its fair share of issues. Despite its sleek design, the aircraft suffered from stability problems. Pilots who took the X-3 for a spin described it as being like driving a sports car with a lawnmower engine. But perhaps the biggest drawback of the X-3 was its limited range. Once the ramjet engine was engaged, the aircraft could only travel for about 70 miles before it ran out of fuel. That's hardly enough distance to make it to Europe if it started over the Atlantic. Ultimately, the Douglas X-3 Stiletto failed to live up to its name. It never truly took flight as intended, remaining grounded by its technical limitations. Which aircraft surprised you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe to Forgotten Machines for more stories about the world's most fascinating and forgotten machines.